Mr. President?
Hello?
Hello?
President.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. President.
Today I called you out here to discuss an important issue that has been brought to my attention. An issue that affects every nation on the planet. Hunger. It has come to my attention that world hunger seems to be getting worse by the day. And it seems like an issue that the U.S. could pitch in some money and help end. This issue affects roughly 795 million people each year and kills roughly 9 million people each year. Now, one of the biggest reasons we have not ended world hunger is the cost. The U.S. solving world hunger is an issue that is very hard to put a yes or no onto, which is why I've called you out here. I want the opinions of some of the biggest political leaders in the United States. I know everybody here is going to have a very different opinion on the issue, so how about everybody introduce themselves and states their stance.
Hello everybody, I'm Chuck Schumer, Democratic Leader of the Senate, and I think that we should help solve world hunger because we're one of the wealthiest nations and we have enough food to go around.
I'm Kevin McCarthy, Majority Leader of the House, and I think we shouldn't help solve this issue because our country is in debt and we don't have the resources to continue helping once we start.
I'm Mitch McConnell, Republican Leader of the Senate, and I think that we should help with hunger because it is a silent pandemic.
I am Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States. And I think that we shouldn't step in to solve world hunger because there are already people starving in the United States.
Thank you, everyone. Now, let's start with Mr. McCarthy and why he is against solving world hunger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that the United States should not be responsible for solving the epidemic that is world hunger. Sure, we are one of the richest countries in the world, but that doesn't shy away from the fact that our nation is in tremendous debt, $20 trillion to be exact. That number is getting larger by the day, with a national increase of almost $1 trillion each year. And with the amount of money it would cost to keep world hunger at bay each year, that would come close to $30 billion. In comparison, we only spend $13.1 billion each year on food and agriculture.
Great points, Mr. McCarthy. So, Mr. Schumer, what do you think of the United States' role should be in ending world hunger?
I believe that the United States should put more money and resources in ending world hunger, mainly because we're one of the richest nations in the world. We put almost $600 billion into our army, and the average income of a United States citizen is roughly $85,000 a year. If we cut down on how much we spend on our defenses just a tiny bit, we could donate more than the $2 billion that we already donate to other nations in need. People look up to us as one of the greatest countries in the world, yet we don't want to help other countries that are not as large as us. I don't think that's how that we should be looked at, other nations, when it comes to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Great points all around. And how about you, Mr. Pence? What is your side of the issue?
Well, I believe that the United States shouldn't get involved in ending world hunger due to the amount of people that are already starving in the United States. More than 14% of all Americans, or just over 46 million people, live below the poverty line, which is more than the entire state of California's population. And the number of people who are starving in the United States is still rising. On top of all of that, the amount of people in the United States that face hunger on a daily basis is around 1 in 6. And the amount of people who die of malnutrition, a lack of proper nutrients, is around 7,000 a year. With that number still rising each year, I have prepared a graph to show just how many people have died of malnutrition in the last 10 years. Let me ask you this. How are we supposed to solve world hunger if we can't even feed the people of the United States?
These points are very valid, and I'm not doubting your judgment, but we would have to buy much more food than we already do. We have enough food to go around. If we are analyzing the facts here, there's about $160 billion in wasted food every year in the United States. And that isn't all. If we can crunch the numbers here, $400 in food per person per year in this country is wasted. That is 31 trillion tons of food gone in the garbage, instead of in Africa or in the Middle East. Let me get even more into detail here. Around 50% of all produce is wasted in the United States. That means produce from farms to the stores where we buy them from, and never in between.
So what if instead of the United States paying for it all, we take donations of money and food? Then we can decrease the amount of money and food that's wasted and help end world hunger.
The total debt of every person in the United States is more than $1.3 trillion, which is around $4,000 a person. And most of that wasted food comes from the rich, who either already donate to the cause or are too greedy to give more money. So the average to below average Americans are not thinking about donating, or wouldn't be able to donate enough to make a huge difference. And even if we try to solve this issue, it will take a lot of dedication financially that we just don't have. All this considered, we definitely wouldn't have enough food or resources to support the starving people of the world.
Why do you say this? $30 billion doesn't sound so bad to me.
It doesn't really sound bad until you realize how much money the United States pours into things such as the military, foreign aid, and other services. Sure, we could spend years saving up just to pay out 1 year of all hungry people on the planet, but that's unrealistic. We are a national superpower. We need to spend money on other things to help our sake. Not to mention that the fiscal budget for 2015 was 3.8 trillion, which is about 12,000 from every single person in the country, statistics-wise. We spend this money on education, housing, health, energy, environment, military, and transportation, just to name a few things. As the years progress, all of these things will rise in price, leaving us conflicted for helping the cause, because everything in our country is already so expensive. Not to mention the shipping costs for the food itself.
Maybe if the citizens of the United States stopped buying things that weren't extremely necessary, like brand new vehicles every year, then more money could be donated to other nations in need. Average income for the citizens of the United States is roughly $81,500, and some of the money could be donated. The amount of full-time employees in the United States is around 127 million. And if each person with a full-time job paid $500 a year to world hunger, that would be around $63 billion, and that would make a rather large difference in the fight against world hunger.
You have a very solid point, Mr. Schumer. Now, Mr. McConnell, you haven't done anything so far. How about you give your stance?
Thanks, Mr. President. All I have to say is that hunger is clearly and very obviously a silent pandemic in the world. We have about 795 million people, or 1 in 9 people, who suffer from chronic malnourishment, with the continent of Asia equaling 2/3 of that. Well, let's get started at the beginning of the sentence. With the continent of Asia equaling 2/3 of that, while the sub-Saharan Africa is the region with the highest prevalence of hunger, where 1 in 4 people that are starving, 1 out of 6 children in developing countries are underweight, and 1 in 4 of the children are stunted.
These are awful statistics. How can we help fix them?
One study shows that if women farmers had the same access to resources as men, the number of hungry people in the world could be reduced by up to 150 million. Not to mention the $160 billion in wasted food that prevails in the United States.
Yes, we have the food to donate, and yes, we could cover some costs. Obviously, there are many starving children around the world, and wasted food could help this cause. We have this money, we have this food, but we could use it to help our people. We have people back here that are facing hunger on a daily basis, and even back in the Roosevelt era, we agreed that we should focus on ourselves first, and foreign affairs only when extremely necessary. We have to help our citizens before helping others. It may seem cruel, but we know that if we helped others before our own people, there would be chances of revolt.
You provide a very valid point. You all provide great arguments, and I see why we could and couldn't help this cause. Thank you all for opening my mind and providing more facts so I can make a solid decision. Let's review our pros and cons.
I believe that the United States should help end world hunger because we're one of the richest nations in the world, and the amount of food that we have is not evenly distributed between all people in the world.
The United States should not help because we are $20 trillion in debt, with that number still rising, and we would not be able to sustain the resources to keep world hunger from coming back.
The United States should not help end world hunger because there are already people starving in the United States. We should focus on our own people rather than the rest of the world.
The United States should help end world hunger because world hunger is a silent epidemic that is affecting millions each year and is killing thousands.
Thank you. So to wrap this all up, world hunger is an epidemic that affects around 795 million people each year. And on top of that, it kills thousands. It is also an epidemic that would cost billions each year to fix. And that would be an issue for any country to fix single-handedly. And whether the United States should or shouldn't help at world hunger can be determined by the facts that we have presented.
Thank you, Mr. President.